pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody here today. I want to thank specifically Irving for hosting us and allowing us to have our workshop and also our meeting here today. And I don't know if Mayor Van Dyne's still here, but we do appreciate that. One of the first action items is the approval of the minutes for September the 11th, 2014. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Sheffield. And Kathleen second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move to the consent agenda. Item number 2. Do we want to walk through each of these?
No, Mr. Chairman. Items 2 are all on the consent agenda. You can take them as a group. If anyone wishes to take any of them off, we'll be more than happy to take them off and present them to you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on 2.1, 2.2, or 2.3? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Oh, Ms. Grayson. Push your little button. I'm sorry. You don't? Okay. So I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Ms. Washington, second. Kathleen. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We move to the director's report on item number 3. And wait a minute. Mr. Ennick, show Mr. Ennick leaving the room on this item, on item number 3.
I think that's
okay.
Okay. Yeah, 3 and what?
3 and
3. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Let me get into the director's report for you. I too want to thank the city of Irving. I don't need that graph up yet. I have quite a story to tell before that graph comes up. The first item I want to talk about is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Parkland's Toll Road. So the plan amendment that we're requesting is not on your agenda for today. It'll be on your agenda for November. So it is not an action item. We're still reviewing the comments received. We will have a staff recommendation in time for the technical committee. That staff recommendation will be by October 17th. When we send it to the technical committee, we'll send it to you, and we'll send it to the media, and we'll send it to all the people that gave us comments, so everyone will know what the staff recommendation is. It involves 2 parts: the path forward in doing the transportation study that we're doing, and obviously the path forward with regard to the transportation plan. So we have to address both of those. I want to take a moment and thank Amanda Wilson from our staff, our public information officer. It has been an extremely busy 6 weeks for her, but she did an unbelievable job in preparing a public meeting for 1,241 people to attend, having a room big enough and have all the amenities necessary to conduct a public meeting. That was on September 22nd. Because we hit a room limit on a previous meeting and we had people out of town, we then had to, in short order, get live streaming up for people to be able to watch the meeting. So we wanted to pilot it anyway to see how we could do live streaming to get and continue to support a bottom-up approach. We had 455 access points in the live streaming. Obviously, there were some out of town, but most of those were probably people within the region. We had a video of the meeting, and we put it on the internet for people to review. 700 people reviewed our public meeting. I don't know if they stayed with us for all 6 hours. I don't have that for you. But if you sum that up, that's the minimum of 2,500 persons participating in what is one item we believe in strongly is a bottom-up approach and citizens participating in the future of their transportation system. There's a petition that I think has crossed 3,000 signatures. A lot of those I know you're receiving as well. But it's been a very busy time. I believe a very positive time if you really believe in listening to the users of our system to get direction in our future. The public has three, I think, compelling issues. I think we're running somewhere around 95% opposed to the Blackland Toll Road, and I think it falls into basically three items. The opposition to the project, being a toll road, and the quality of life that the citizens have in that part of the region, they perceive to be in direct conflict with the introduction of that transportation facility. And we'll know by October 17th what at least our recommendation will be with regard to that. There are concerns, even though under state law, there is the ability of a private developer to have eminent domain authority. There are companies that are grandfathered, I believe 2 or 3 are still active. They're grandfathered by the legislature to be able to build toll facilities. But a public, having a private sector company with eminent domain authority that can build a toll road for a profit is a concern to the citizens. It is a question we wish to be addressed by the legislature. In item 8.1, in Amanda's legislative item, we include a statement requesting the legislature to evaluate, is that still how they wish to proceed. The third is with regard to potential environmental impacts, and we will address that in a moment. With our minutes going to TxDOT. TxDOT oversees the environmental process, we do not. So our minutes that should be completed shortly will be transferred over to the Dallas District, to send them to the Environmental Division to see if the Environmental Division wishes to do anything different with regard to that environmental process. The Blacklands toll project is not in the plan. It's in a study recommendation. So we do have to decide how to conduct our study and what our recommendation will be in the transportation plan, not just in this quarter, but the other quarters that our staff has presented to you in the past. And this is what the conflict is. The conflict is you have very passionate citizens wishing to maintain the quality of life in the future that they have, up against, especially in Collin County, more people will locate in Collin County between now and 2040 than live there today. Think about that for a moment. More people will locate in Collin County between now and 2040 than live there today. And that's not just our demographics forecast, it's forecasts that are done by independent people. Collin County is probably the fastest growing part of the United States. And, more so the responsibility of this staff to recommend not what should be done tomorrow, but we have to recommend what should be done in order to sustain a region in 2035 and 2040. We can't just take the easy way out. The responsibility of the Metropolitan Planning Organization is to try to make sure the 3 million people that have not yet arrived have some transportation system as part of that mix. You also have added to this KCS, a Class 1 railroad, who wishes to build an intermodal facility, and we will be spending a lot of time between now and October 17th trying to get what the latest KCS plans are. But an intermodal facility of the size KCS is planning also has transportation implications. And that KCS intermodal facility is basically a ground zero with regard to this part of the region and our recommendations. So, I think the bottom line is we've been requested by you to do this study for over a year. I thought we were making great progress. The technical analytics has included, we have a barrier with the 2 lakes. So you have Interstate 30 State Highway 66, State Highway 78, and US 380, carrying more than their fair share of the traffic across those facilities. But in the last 60 days, the tone has changed very dramatically than where we were the first 12 or 14 months in the study. So we obviously will have to rectify those two items and bring forward a path forward to you. So if you look at the staff director's report, item 1, I do want to underscore the importance of a bottom-up approach. That is our strength, always has been, and always will be. Even though you're getting strong negative comments, it doesn't change the importance of a bottom-up approach. The Blacklands Toll Road decision, October 17th, will be the last date we can come up with a path forward, and we will let you know immediately upon that. The issues have arisen with regard to our traffic counts and forecasts. We've reviewed them. We're very comfortable with them. I've asked our staff to not use the newspaper to weigh in between what TxDOT's data is and our data. So I've asked TxDOT to review the data that the citizens have pointed to for them to weigh in with regard to what the purpose of that data is, and not for us to whipsaw our partners in the media. So we hope a half-page white paper comes out by TxDOT says, well, this is what our data is for, what its purpose is intended to be. So we have requested that. There's been recent discussions with regard to staff and staff's involvement. Remember, this organization we're working with is a legitimate organization. It has the support of the legislature. I'm not sure it has the same standing as a TxDOT or a DART or a North Texas Tollway Authority, but it has standing, and we take our partners very seriously. We purposely, in the beginning, firewalled our staff, where we didn't look at any of their results. And if you remember, we told you we were going to do an independent assessment without the benefit of their ideas, and we were going to hire contractors to help us who had no involvement on their project. And we went ahead and did that. We had one person as the liaison. Tom Shelton was that liaison. I think there's quotes of Tom's involvement that are being taken out of context. Tom's job for us was to be the liaison between us and that client, that customer, as part of that process. So there's been some discussion about that. With regard to the legislative program, as I mentioned earlier, that'll be an 8.1, and Amanda will bring that to your attention. And then the public record, when the minutes are complete, we will send those to the district to see what TxDOT wishes to do with regard to the environmental process. The bottom line is there are needs that have to be met. And I think I indicated to you over the summer, even before this happened, that if the pendulum swings with regard to tools versus revenues, that pendulum is going to swing within the Dallas-Fort Worth region. And I think this is an opportunity to request our legislature, where I think we would easily say in the last session, if you can't give us revenue, then give us tools. And I think that communication is tools are no longer good enough. You really need to focus on TxDOT's $5 billion worth of need. The citizens of the state have an opportunity to vote on the Proposition 1 item in November. And then, if positive, that takes you maybe 20% of the way to this, 25% of the way to these $5 billion worth of needs. We are so far from the main path of building transportation in this country, where we pay as you go, money meets the needs, where we're 2 streets over, developing sophisticated things like apps to get on toll facilities with discounts, because the main path forward is no longer available to us. Number 2 on your report, Judge Self, Councilman Jordan from Fort Worth, and TMLD, and I served on the Proposition 1 committee. So electronic item 3.1 is the report of our committee in advance of the election of citizens in November. If you have questions on that, we'll be happy to take them. At the last commission meeting, and we do have Commissioner Vandergrift with us. He has stayed over from our discussion at the workshop. There was discussion with regard to a lot of fatalities in the energy sector of the state. Maintenance hasn't kept up. Let's review all of the projects that are being funded in the state and see if those project revenues need to be moved to the energy sector. I've gotten calls from Arlington, Irving, Fort Worth, others concerned about that. We have reviewed with TxDOT staff. We have been to Austin in a meeting to confirm that at this particular point in time, I believe none of your projects are at risk with regard to being shifted to other parts of the state to meet those needs. We continue to hope that the funds will be released to TxDOT, $400 million or so, for them to spend on the energy portions of the state. So at this particular point, my report to you is not to worry about all your funded transportation projects. If that changes, we will get back to you, and we stand ready to defend the projects that we have at the commission if necessary, but I don't think that will be necessary. If you would call up that PowerPoint presentation on number 4, I want to celebrate some good news here. This is the ozone readings, the number of exceedances all the way back to 1998, and you can see the general trend. But the next graph, and I know we were aided by good weather, but if you go to the next page, we still have a few more days to go. The ozone season goes till the end of October, but if it stays, this would be the first time in our history we have met the 1997 standard with regard to ozone. That's the good news. The bad news is that's no longer our standard. Our standard has been moved to the 2008 standard, but you can see we're almost halfway towards that. Obviously aided by the weather, but I still contend with the aggressive management and operation program you have in transportation infrastructure, we're making headway with regard to that. I thought that was good news and wanted to share that with you. The next item, electronic 3.3, you see TxDOT constructing the first ever RTC TxDOT use of shoulders during the peak period. It's on the 3-mile section of 161 between 183 and Beltline. That project is under construction, and TxDOT has a fact sheet on that. Obviously doing more with less with regard to that. I think we reported to you we didn't do very well on our Tiger grants. Neither did a lot of people. We did get the land use transportation connections with schools funded, but other projects we submitted from our region were not funded in the Tiger program. 6 and 7 talks about the minutes. We will develop a link on all the comments that we've received. The public meeting minutes from September, not related to the Black Lands, are already out there. But the September 22nd public meeting minutes, as soon as we have them complete, we will post them. And obviously, we'll have our recommendation to you by the October 17th deadline. One final thing under recent correspondence is at your place. It's a major sporting event, but that's not why I'm flagging it to you. The first college football playoff series final championship game will be in our region in January. But there's a whole bunch of other things that I wish you would take seriously related to this. And the organizing committee has asked me to pass this on to you and to other audiences with regard to the taste, which is related to food banks, benefiting teachers as part of their legacy, music festival, and other things that are there. If you're a football fan, great. If you're a college football fan, great. But there's other things that are, in my mind, just as important. And please pass these on or get involved or ask those questions with regard to the community elements associated with this opportunity in our particular region. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will stop there with my director's report and take any questions anybody has.
Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the Blacklands Corps, I've received a lot of quality mail in the last month or so, getting quite familiar with that territory over there. What might this organization, the RTC, be asked to approve in November specifically, other than a change to the 2035 plan?
So in the transportation plan, my memory is there's about 20 elements that are in there. A lot of them are operational, meaning there are projects already in the plan, but we've adjusted or tweaked the stages of implementation. The only major significant item would be, do you place the Blacklands corridor in the plan or not in the transportation plan? That's a decision we've got to go through and ask you, is this particular corridor ready to be placed into the transportation plan or not? And probably just as important, is that particular recommendation of a toll facility the best way to meet the needs of the Hunt County residents and the Collin County residents, or is there some other way to meet those particular needs? And we're going to try to get as much of that work done to see what, if anything, should be placed in the plan. And more importantly, what else do we have to study in that particular corridor? Because we have this huge conflict that we like the lifestyle we have. It's going to be very difficult to maintain that lifestyle unless government were to control the land in some way, because you're going to have developers. I can point to dozens of places where people wish to maintain a certain lifestyle, but landowners sold their land and buildings and houses and things were developed in those particular locations. So part of our recommendation is what changes should we make to our transportation study, and the other part is what's ready to go into the transportation plan. For example, do we make improvements on interstate for Hunt County? Would we make more money and commitments for financial assistance to the Interstate 30 corridor as a part of our recommendation? That would be an example.
So let me make sure I understand. We will be looking at adding this corridor to Blacklands corridor, a thoroughfare system, but we will also consider about timing, method of implementation.
You're going to be asked to put it in, or you're going to be asked not to put it in. So that's decision number one. And if you're being asked not to put it in, are you being asked to put in something else or not? And you're also going to be asked, since we don't have consensus on this, do you want us to go study these particular issues as we move forward in that particular corridor? Because we are set, we are left with needs that are going to have to be met. I understand the magnitude of the comments. I ask you to just be patient with us till October 17th until you see our recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Chair. You know, I really do believe this Blacklands toll road decision is going to test the true mettle of this whole body, RTC, and especially those people who live in that immediate area and represent it. I've gotten about at least 65 comments and have read 64 of them. And these people are really passionate, you know, about where they are. But in an elective position, it's our job to look to the future, plan for the future, and help this region be prepared for the future. And that's going to be a hard call, especially people who are sitting in those seats right now. Because these people who are so vocal about this, you know how it goes. The ones who are quiet said, you know, just prepare for my kids in the future and stuff, and then I'm going to be happy. But the ones that are talking are the ones that are going to try and get you unelected. And I'm telling you, I am really concerned because I think back, we're celebrating 40 years at DFW. If Mayor Johnston, Mayor Barr, Mayor Stovall, and Mr. Cullum hadn't had the vision that they had, we would not be a player on the world stage that we are now. So I say to you, we have really got to make some hard decisions. In 2040, they are coming. We're working real hard to make people want to come to North Texas. And now that we're getting them to come and projecting that they are coming, we saying, hold up, just as long as you don't touch nothing of mine and don't change my lifestyle, let them come. And the two cannot coexist. And I simply say, whatever the staff bring to us, in spite of the heat that's coming out of the kitchen of these real vocal people who are against this, I'm hoping this this body gonna have the ability to stand up on our hind legs and make the decision that's best for this region for the next generation.
Thank you, Shannon. Is that you?
Thank you, Mike. Michael, you mentioned earlier the enforcement of eminent domain in the private sector. Did you not?
Yes, sir.
And you were saying that, I want to know where RTC is on that.
So, under state law, there's, I think originally were 6, I think there's 2 or 3 companies that are still active, that the legislature has given the authority of eminent domain to. And Ken has prepared a brief on it, and he can send it, or we've already sent it to all the RTC, I can't remember. And in that process, they go through a process, a little bit different than TxDOT, but they go through a process with regard to eminent domain and independent assessment and negotiated settlement. But in the case of the public sector, we are to use eminent domain for the public good. What is coming out by a lot of the citizens in the inquiry to the legislature is this company also has a profit motive. So what's complicating this a great deal is the entity who has the right of eminent domain but still has the right to make a profit. That is not settling well with 30, 40% of the comments that we're getting. Now, if you cross over to the other elements, it's not that unique in Texas. You've got pipeline companies and electric companies and other companies that have the right of eminent domain. Now, they often use it in the form of an easement where they're using someone's land versus ownership where they're actually putting a significant transportation project on it. So you're going to get to decide that in item 8.1 today, where we are requesting the legislature to review that particular concern. In fact, staff from the Lieutenant Governor's office, I think it was the next day, asked Amanda, could you send me what people are saying? Because the Lieutenant Governor's office would like to hear what these particular concerns are. But they boil down to companies that have every right under state law to purchase eminent domain, but a public very concerned that the eminent domain leads to a profit capability of that particular company. And you'll see that in the comments that we send you.
But who would control that? The government?
Well, it's controlled right now by, at least in the environmental process, by TxDOT. TxDOT's currently requiring an environmental assessment. The comments will be sent to them to see if TxDOT wishes to move that to an environmental impact study. But the environmental process is managed by TxDOT. So if anyone is managing the eminent domain, it would be TxDOT, having been satisfied they've met review of all options, all procedures. But if the project isn't in your transportation plan, the project can't be built. So this test of should it go in the plan or not, as Washington said, is a very critical decision for you.
Okay, I understand what you're saying there, but I just hope this doesn't force us to continue moving away from a capitalistic society. And it's just, I'm not for eminent domain in government, so you know where I'm coming from. And I sure can't see it done in the private sector. That's what I'm getting at. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, yeah. Real quick, just mention, Michael, about KCS, and since it happens to be in my town, they are already under construction, already working on it, and the projections, if my memory serves right, that they give us is that will increase truck traffic about 3% in that area. So, of course, 3% could be a lot when you look at the number of trucks that may be going through. A real quick question. I know a number of the cities have done resolutions. Are you aware of how many cities have given resolutions?
Yeah, we have them all. We have 9 homework assignments for staff. One is to produce a map for you that will show you what is the position of all the local governments in the corridor to aid the RTC in their decision. They're being mapped. Every day we get a change. Sometimes the position has changed. Sometimes they involve the city, sometimes they involve the city's ETJ. All those are being mapped and will be brought back to the RTC in
And one of the concerns from being one of those cities is obviously we understand the need for planning for the future and thoroughfare growth and all that. Our concern in this particular case is there's so few answers that we don't have. And it's not because of COG, it's trying to get from this company, just to be quite honest, where the toll road's going to actually go, where exits and entrances are going to be, and how that's going to impact our communities. And what's happening is, to tell you all, the citizens, just like they're copying you, well, you've got 65, I've got about 400 messages from those citizens, and I don't have any answers for them. I can't tell them anything because I don't know. And that's a challenge that we're having from being right there in the thick of it with them. So those are
One of the things that has hurt us, and I'm glad you brought that up, typically what happens is an item is put in the plan where we communicate, we're not sure what a corridor would be, but this mode of transportation is necessary. We put the Chisholm Trail in the plan. I don't know. I think Mr. Vandergriff will tell us, I think it was 60 years ago. But the exact alignment was the product of hundreds of efforts years later. What's hurting us in this particular case is the environmental process actually led the decision to put it in the plan. So you've got two things going on that are very confusing to the public, where we're trying to determine what node and what corridor should go into a system plan. At the same time, someone is studying very detailed discussions with regard to alignments and right of entry, and typically there's 5 to 8 years between those activities, and right now they're happening exactly at the same time, and that's not helping.
Well, and then also, like at the meeting, they had the 1,200 people, the words eminent domain get brought up, and that gets discussed when, the citizens don't even know for sure where the road's going. Panic, basically, is what ends up happening, and I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, you have 1,200 people very concerned that their home is going to be taken. And if you look at the options, I think the worst option is 37 displacements. But there's no one that can tell anybody at this point where the 37 displacements are going to be. And some people are so concerned about their home and their quality of life that none of the alternatives may be within 10 miles of their house, but it doesn't matter. They're very passionate about their particular position, and you can't blame them with regard to the beautiful place it is and the history. So it's a very sensitive situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with all the comments. I will throw out, I want a point of clarification related to the vote on November. This is to approve the corridor, the recommendation related to that there is a need for a corridor, correct?
Yeah, the recommendation would be a corridor and a mode.
But not a specific route or where it's going.
Yeah, should there be a corridor or not in the plan at this point? In no way could we come up with a specific route because the environmental process is what determines.
And that there's no timetable specifically put forth in the recommendations.
Well, we would have to in the plan because of your ozone, the lack of ozone attainment. We under federal rule have to put it in one of 3 time frames into the future. Because to do the air quality analysis, we have to assume it to be opened at a certain time. So if it is recommended, we would have to place it in a certain time frame.
But that wouldn't be, I assume, next year or something like that.
I don't want to say any more.
Oh, I understand. My other question is, and I'm going to warn the whole council, 100 people there live in Collin County. This is just the tip of the iceberg where this council is going to have to make really difficult decisions because people are moving in so rapidly. The traditional style of planning for transportation in the region is not going to work as well. This is a long-term process. The longer it takes, I have so many more people coming in, it's going to cause lots and lots of what you're seeing today. I mean, you've got 400 emails. I probably have 600, 800 of them. Commissioner Williams probably has 1,000 plus. So I do see this as the tip of the iceberg because I think there's a lot of other corridors. If you look at Collin County, so few corridors, major highways in Collin County, that is going to be a major process to figure out how to move 2-3 million people around the county when there's so few major roads and highways within the county at the current situation, current time point. And so I do agree with Bernice related to this is going to be a tough, these are going to be hard decisions, but you got. I am looking at it. I got to look at the future. I got to figure out a way to let these people move, allow these people to move forward. Businesses will stop coming to the region. Growth will stop. But I want to just be clarified. This isn't going to decision in November. It's not going to be. This is where it goes, and we're not. And because the environmental process is ongoing, that's going to ultimately determine.
The plan never dictates the location. It dictates the mode and it dictates the time, and then we turn it over to the transportation providers and they work out the alignments through the bidding process.
Manny?
Well, and we all sit on this council, so to say that we don't have a dog in the hunt is not really accurate because we should all have an input. I will say I'll be very sensitive to the folks who actually represent the region and come from that area and their comments as we move forward. I'm not advocating one way or the other at this point. I know you're going to bring us a recommendation. I hope that at the point that you bring a recommendation, we have an opportunity to look at what is the need or the projected need for additional transportation in the region, in that area, and how it ties into our system, and not be drawn into an argument about whether it should be a private company or a public company, whether it should be TxDOT or whether it should be a CDA, or whether it's, in a domain this way or that way. And we have multiple ways that we have accomplished what we've needed to. We just opened North Carolina Express. Essentially, that was funded by a private entity, by and large, but it still accomplishes the public purpose. The the Chisholm Trail Parkway, obviously an NTTA project, more of a closer to a government entity than NTE, but still, it's a toll road. We do what we have to do to move people. And the other contrast, I think, is in the north part of Fort Worth, where we were 15 years behind on building infrastructure, and we're just now getting started on I-35 that we needed 10 years ago. Or we have Chisholm Trail Parkway, where some of it is a little behind, but much of it is out ahead of the curve. You can drive and you can see where the people are going to be, and now there's going to be a road to serve them. Those really are two contrasting images, and I think Jonas would agree. Thank God we've got Chisholm Trail Parkway there to accommodate that, and that he won't have to live through what I did when I was elected 9 years ago and have people continually telling me, why are you behind? Because we just simply didn't have the money or couldn't anticipate the needs we were going to have in Northeast or North Fort Worth. But I hope that you will give us an opportunity to have input from you and a recommendation on whether there is a need or there is not a need for a road. The rest of that needs to be worked out. I think you will have a political scale.
Okay. Lee?
Thank you. Michael, you mentioned several times that really what we're trying to determine is what is the mode. Is there any other mode that's under consideration besides the roadway?
Well, we have in our typical fashion, we did a very comprehensive review. So we are preserving the NETEX corridor for a future rail line, but it's not warranted at this point. And we are recommending, park and ride locations as part of the mix. We get bicycles part of the mix. So the study has, probably 10 recommendations. We're not getting a lot of comment on 9 of those areas. It's should there be a toll road in this particular corridor or not is where most of the comments, almost all the comments are.
As we're trying to overcome non-attainment, we may have also considered that just building more roadways is maybe contributing to that.
Yeah. Sir Chair, just in full disclosure, I do want to disclose that I am a resident of Collin County, though I live in the city of Dallas. So my dog is barking loud in this home.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not,
Yeah, I guess, Ken, would you let anyone who's declared a potential conflict to be able to join us again.
We can move to item 4. Carla's going to talk to us about transportation alternatives, program project selection. It is an action item.
And then with any of you, when you return, we want the minutes to identify the time of the return. So if someone could remind me when Mr. Enoch is, we'd like our minutes to reflect the time of the re-entry for future need if needed. Carla?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm bringing you information, or actually an action item, on the TAP program. We started this effort last December with a series of public meetings, and in February, you approved a program rules, and we launched a call for projects at the end of February. Received quite a few applications, and today we're going to show you our staff recommendations. I went too far. Excuse me.
Back. Here we go.
Okay. So within the call for projects, we had $28.7 million of transportation alternative funds. We did a standard 66 split to the Eastern District, 34 to the West. It operates like CMAQ dollars. We had funding for 3 fiscal years, and we also brought to you an option to add additional funds if warranted. We have 3 types of categories that cities could apply for: active transportation, which is our bicycle pedestrian type projects; safety and access to schools, coordinating school districts for sidewalks and other improvements; and then urban thoroughfare or boulevards. And then we had caps of the federal dollars that we would award to each project that was submitted. Additionally, the 2 other requirements for each of the projects were that their right-of-way already had to be acquired, and that a resolution would be provided from each local government or agency supporting a commitment to local match if funding was provided. Each of the projects required a local match, and then for our safety and access to school projects, we provided transportation development credits as a possible option to provide the match for these projects to partner with the federal dollars. There was a series of criteria that you approved, categories like safety or reducing barriers. There was also some additional criteria we looked at regarding project readiness with engineering and design. Was all the right-of-way in place or easements, funding overmatch, or even geographic dispersion. So we received quite a few projects. We received 51 for a total request of $61 million. And again, we only had 28.7, so there wasn't quite enough to go around. But you can see the split here between the districts and then also between the categories: 44 million in the east and 16 million in the west. So we're recommending today 37 projects for funding. Here's a map that shows the locations of those projects. Active transportation was by far one of our more popular categories. Those are the green dots. The triangles are the safety and access to school, and there's 1 urban thoroughfare boulevard project that we'll be recommending. Within your packet, reference item 4.1 actually has a large table that provides all of the funding breakout and the formulas that went into the scoring, but I'm going to highlight right now the list of the projects and the funding amounts that we're currently recommending. There are a few projects that have yellow arrows on them where we're recommending a reduction of funds. We've contacted each of these cities and coordinated that with them. For the most part, it was areas where funds were ineligible for certain activities that were submitted. When you look at the Dallas-Paris District for active transportation, we're recommending 12 projects for a total of $21.7 million of federal award. For the safety and access to school in the Dallas-Paris District, $2.9 million, and there'll also be a TDC request to go along with that. For the Fort Worth District, we've got $8.6 million that we're recommending and 7 projects for the active transportation category. With safety and access to school, we've got 5 projects of $1.9 million and also some TDCs there that we are suggesting to use. And then there's 1 urban thoroughfare boulevard project for the city of Fort Worth for $3 million. So overall, here's sort of the big picture of the recommendations. We're recommending a total of 37 projects for $38.2 million. We're recommending to use $28.4 million of the TAP funds. It leaves about $367,000 on the table that we can roll into future calls for projects. Because we had so many good projects, we're also recommending to use $9.8 million of our CMAQ funds. Our congestion mitigation air quality funds are really well suited for bicycle and pedestrian type projects. And then the TDCs overall come to $367,000. So with that, today we're requesting action. After that, we'll be working with local governments to submit their projects into the TIP STIP. The deadline is October 24th, and those get approved in the March-April timeframe. And then from there, cities will be able to contract directly with the state to start implementing these projects. So today's action is to recommend approval of the 2014 Transportation Alternative Program Call for Projects as provided in your reference item 4.1 of your packet, which includes the use of TAP funds, CMAQ dollars, and also transportation development credits. We're also asking for the ability to administratively amend the TIP and the STIP to include all TAP projects in the region. One other thing that I wanted to mention really quick before you take action is the Transportation Commission has also updated their rules for their TAP calls for projects. Initially, they were suggesting or proposing that projects within large urban areas would not be able to submit to the state's call for projects. They have since amended that, and our local governments will be able to submit to their call for projects. So they're hoping to launch a call at the end of the year, early next year. So there will be other opportunities coming up from the state and then from our region for additional funds to be available. I just wanted to make you aware of that information. With that, this is the action.
Okay. Let's see what we have.
I'd just like to make a couple comments. First off, review of the projects are very exciting. I think they spread across the region nicely, and I'm encouraged to see them come forward. But I'd also like to thank staff, Carla and Mr. Kessler, that I went to some of the meetings. Not only did they outreach to the public to look for their involvement, but to explain to a lot of our partner municipalities and their staff how these would be judged, what would be some interesting projects, and in many cases help them with how they go through the submission process is how I believe we got so many submitted. So thank you very much.
Awesome.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion for approval.
Any other comments? Questions?
Wait, y'all. Wait a minute. I thought we said we wanted to go down there and get money, and that's number 3 on this list. That's not it?
No, we're on item 4 right now.
Oh, okay, well, ditto that comment whenever we get to the one where we talk about this.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael, you have the action item number 5, Memorandum of Understanding for a Transit Partnership in Mesquite.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'll go through this at a pretty high elevation. You set aside $8 million to basically reach out to our transit partners, potentially purchasing vehicles, to delegate to the transit agencies what's the best way they wish to move forward and create partnerships. And we're trying to do 2 things. We're trying to move ahead in a cost-effective way to provide near-term transit service in some very important niche markets, but also make sure we can build the rail system over time that's in your mobility plan. And what's happening is there's an initiative where transit partners, often rural transit partners, are now partnering with the urban transit partners to provide immediate transit, but maintain a strong central transit agency role, so we can be able to implement our plan over time, because a lot of the rural transit providers are not in the rail implementation business. So the win-win is these partnerships that are created. I think the Mesquite example is one that may be repeated in the future. You have allocated $8 million for vehicles, and we are going to propose a portion of that be dedicated to DART for the implementation of this particular item. So the Mesquite service, the current initiative that Mesquite has ends December 2014, and staff over the last 6 months has reached out to Star Transit, DART, our office in Mesquite, to work out a partnership on how best to move forward with the implementation of this initiative. I've had a couple of conversations with Gary about the opportunity of having short-term opportunities and long-term role the transit agencies need to play to implement projects in the plan. So we go to the next graph. if you go back to, you are not approving the memorandum of understanding. I'm just trying to give you some of these principles behind it, and I'll get to your action. This permits elderly and transit service to continue in the Mesquite community, similar to their Compass service, by inviting Star Transit, which is a transit provider to the east in Rockwall County, to partner directly with DART to help in the provision of this particular service. With regard to Star, the benefit for them is they're creating seamless service across the jurisdictions, where you don't have a rural provider and then you switch to an urban provider. These services now get integrated through the communication directly of our transit agencies as they talk to each other. And DART is introducing newer technologies to Star Transit as part of this, creating the seamlessness of the particular service. With regard to DART, the benefits are on the next page. This permits us to have the ability of having short-term service improvements that are not stopped and then start, but give the RTC opportunity to continue to use our central transportation authorities to build a rail plan over time as part of that initiative. With regard to you, the benefits on the next page to COG is to facilitate this transit partnership and develop these win-win solutions. This is east of DART. I think some of this will now be moved north of the DART community to see what's the best way to do it. To hold the community harmless, we provided $8 million worth of vehicles for the implementation of these type of services that we previously approved. We're also willing to use some of our transportation development credits if they're needed to help get the partnership done. And again, this ability of getting all of the money to DART with regard to transit operations and letting DART decide and the DART board decide what's the best way to implement those particular services through the MOU. The same thing is being talked about to the Denton County Transportation Authority on how they wish to move forward. And the same conversation is occurring with the Fort Worth Transportation Authority with regard to how they best wish to move forward. And each one will have a different recommendation to you. It's the DART one is just coming in first. So what are the next steps? The MOU has to be approved. If you go to the next graphic, has to be approved by all the parties. They then have to have interlocal agreements. We're on a time frame or a glide slope to make sure this happens by the December-January time frame. So this elderly and disabled persons are not left behind as part of this particular initiative. Here's the schedule. I think we're going first with regard to action. I guess the Star Transit Board went first. Technical committees approved it. You're being asked to approve it today. DART Board in the Mesquite will be asked to approve it in November. Service agreements are completed, and then this service will provide continuous service to these particular users. The specific to your action is last, and this is an action item. Champion the notion that transit operators, both urban and rural, are working together to create seamless transit service, and what is the art of the possible in moving forward transit. To approve these key points of partnership in these memorandum of understanding, and then in this particular case, the request is $450,000 of the $8 million would be available for the vehicles to be used in this service. These vehicles are going to come in a shade of white, hopefully, because if they're not used or the pilot program is different, we will ship these vehicles to a different part of the region. So your vehicles are intended to jumpstart conversations in communities, wrap them and market them as best you can. But this is a revolving transit vehicle program that transit agencies can request you to move them to different places. A successful streetcar may need a circulation of small buses in the Bishop Arts area, whatever it may be. transit agencies can then move forward in some innovative way with you to advance transit, its benefits to air quality, and get away from these hopefully big clashes we have with regard to transit and move forward. So Jessie ordinarily would be here to present it to you, so she unfortunately doesn't bring her sense of humor today. She was unavailable to be here today, but here is the action item being requested, Mr. Chairman, to move forward in this partnership.
Sure. Any questions? Rob?
Just real quick, did you say, or was it in here, what the duration of this next phase is?
I think it's 2 or 3 years, but let me ask him if he recalls the duration of the agreement.
I believe it's a 2-year period.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move for approval.
This is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, Michael, you have it. United States Secretary of Transportation letter.
So very quickly, you've got in electronic item 6.1, the request of the Secretary. The Secretary is working on national legislation with Congress to create a national infrastructure bank. This would permit the federal government to go beyond TIFIA loans to backstop projects. I remind you, TxDOT's backstop on the Chisholm Trail, by them simply backstopping those loans, changed the bond ratings of NTTA's loans and lowered the cost of that project by $400 million in interest. So this notion is being applied across the country. The Secretary is saying our nation's capital should be doing this as a way to support transportation projects within our urban regions. We thought it important to send him, in this case, 4 different types of projects, so he has the benefit of a variety with regard to the eligibility of an infrastructure bank. We have toll managed lanes, we have regional rail, we have toll roads, and we have high-speed rail between Dallas and Fort Worth as a part of examples that could potentially be included in an infrastructure bank. The 6 projects we talked about, we sent out to the partners. We believe we have agreement from TxDOT on Southern Gateway, TxDOT on 635 Phase 3, TxDOT on 35W, the section north of 287. The Cotton Belt Corridor, as you see in the letter, we talk about passenger rail to and from DFW International Airport. We're not very specific if it's the west or the east. We purposely wordsmith that to not step on any toes. 6.2 is a copy of the letter. Trinity Parkway as the example of the toll road. That's the only toll road that's in our frame of reference right now by NTTA. And then the high-speed rail project between Fort Worth and Dallas. I'll stop there. The letter is there. Reference item 6.2. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Ms. Grayson?
Well, it's no surprise I'm opposed to the Trinity Parkway being in here. Who was surveyed on the Trinity? Were both TxDOT and NTTA surveyed and concurred that the Trinity?
I believe we surveyed NTTA on the Trinity Parkway.
And they agreed it should be this.
NTTA has the lead on the Trinity Parkway. TxDOT doesn't. So we surveyed the toll managed lanes for TxDOT, and we surveyed NTTA for the Trinity Parkway.
And they have agreed it should be
Yes.
this list. It's actually, we have the Trinity Parkway project scattered everywhere in this agenda today.
It's in 3 places.
It's in 3 places. And maybe some of you think that you don't have a dog in this hunt, as Mr. Scar said on a previous item, but you really do. You do, because this is $1.5 billion project. And we have lots of projects in this region that need funding. Do you want to spend $1.5 billion on a project that a great many people in Dallas do not want to see built? Now, I'm outnumbered here today. My colleagues will argue that we've had 2 elections. Those of us who have been involved in those elections feel that it was riddled with misinformation for the voters and confusing ballot language, but that's in the past. But I may not be outnumbered on this much longer. We have 4 council members currently on our council who are adamantly opposed to this road. That's 4 council districts represented. We have an election coming up in May. All the council seats are up. We have 6 council members for sure that are leaving the council because of term limits. We're going to have folks running in every one of those council districts that are opposed to the Trinity Parkway. So come May, we could have a council that has a completely different perspective on this. And yet it looks as though, by looking at this agenda, that we are making a mad rush to try and make sure that we find a funding mechanism, no matter if it's a comprehensive development agreement or it gets put on this national program, or somehow, some way, try and fund this road that a lot of people in Dallas don't want. It's very similar to this Blacklands corridor. People have been arguing about this for much longer than the Blacklands corridor. But if this body wants to move ahead and try and fund a road that a great many people in that city do not want, then I think that's going to be a very unfortunate decision. I'm also not going to be able to support the Cotton Belt, even though I understand that we're not necessarily talking about the western portion or the eastern portion. We're talking about the line in general. But there's a number of people, a large number of people in my council district that are very concerned about that road. And in fairness to them, to represent them adequately today, I'm not going to be able to say that I can support that. We aren't very far down the pathway with that Cotton Belt in terms of deciding even what mode it's going to be. And so it could be bus, it could be rail. I don't think we're there yet in terms of including it here in this particular effort. So I do hope, though, that we do not include this Trinity Parkway, that I just can't stress enough how many people do not want this road to be built.
Thank you. Ms. Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 1998 to 2014 is hardly a rush to judgment. In 1998, the voters said, build a road. In 2007, despite a referendum that cost the taxpayers a great deal of money, led by Ms. Angela Hunt and supported by Councilmember Grayson, the voters said, build a road. As an elected official, I have respect for what the voters say. A minority of voters took Ms. Grayson's position, but we are a society that is ruled by the will of the majority, and the majority said, build. I have no clue who may be sitting on the council come June of 2015. Neither does Ms. Grayson. All we know is who will not be there, but we know who is there now. And sitting at the council now are 12 members who say we favor, and 3, Ms. Grayson, Mr. Kingston, and Mr. Griggs, who say we don't. We are talking of the now, and we're not talking of what may possibly be, because Ms. Grayson may be wrong. There may be 6 new members who have the same opinion that we have now. Before I came to this meeting today, I was at the Downtown Dallas Inc. luncheon, where the mayor of our great city gave the state of the city. And the mayor emphatically stated that he supports the road, that we have moved this far along the plan, that it will be a good road, that it will look good, and that it is key to Southern development, which is where I want to go next. We have developed an awful lot of roads north. We've developed an awful lot of economic development north. But now we have an opportunity to develop from the south. And somehow, I seem to be hearing that rather than have an alternative transportation mode to bring people out of the South, we should be happy with buses and bicycles. Somehow I find that difficult to accept. We have 2 transportation arteries coming out of the South, and they are currently chock-a-block. I know because that's where I travel from. The Parkway allows us an additional transportation artery out of the South. It also enables economic development south. My esteemed colleague is in the minority, and I hope that this body will keep that in mind. I believe the Trinity Parkway, as well as the Cotton Belt, should be a part of any submission on anything that this body does, and I will vote accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Who was next? There was Light.
Lee, was he? Or Mr. Cadane? You're
Oh,
late.
boy, yes.
Yeah, we already had the light on there.
Sure, thank you. I couldn't agree more with my fellow council member, and I want people to recognize that there's a difference between the policy of the city and individual opinions. And the current policy of the city of Dallas is to provide for the Trinity Parkway to be built. And I think that's very important that you know, as it's gone through transportation and many council discussions, that has been the policy of the city and the standing of the city at this point. With regards to the Cotton Belt, which is a rail line that goes through my district, I want folks on this council to keep in mind that we're not a council district transportation commission, we're a regional. And this is an important regional line from both the east side and the west side that enables connectivity to DFW Airport, enables mobility throughout the region, and really helps us move forward in a mobility plan that gives us alternatives to traffic. So both these items, as well as all the items on this list, I think are important to move forward and let the federal government know what are our priorities in this region, and therefore I'm supporting it as it's presented. Thank you.
My turn.
Yes, sir.
Well, I am totally supporting what Ms. Hill said. This one thing that we're not looking at is this road is necessary to relieve the traffic from I-30 and 35. That has been you talk about the ozone, and the ozone situation in that area in the evenings and in the mornings is horrific. And this road will help relieve that. My colleagues that are against it have no clue how to relieve that traffic on that road. This is I have not seen any other plans other than this one that help relieve it. And as Ms. Hill said, the majority of the city of Dallas did approve it and does want it. And hopefully this committee will move it forward because we need it bad. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, is that you?
Yes, sir. I represent 10 cities, obviously, as a cluster vote. I've heard nothing from other neighboring cities. Number one, the biggest one that is a participant in the Cotton Belt itself, they've been grapevine who went to the polls and actually enabled their tax to support it. I do have, in the city of Colleyville, we do have a contingent that live along the track, or they are identified as Tea Party libertarians that do not believe in public transportation being paid for with tax dollars. I just want to voice that their opinion is valid, but the only reference I have to go back to in there is in 2006 when the Kent County voted for bonds that did enable a portion of that money, I think Commissioner, up to 50% to be used for multimodal, including the rail. That Hollywood voters, particularly in those same precincts, turned out 70% or better in favor of that. So we are not taking a vote. I just want their voice of opposition to be on record, since I do represent all the people, but clearly it is not a mandate of any type at this point because we have not taken an election in the city. And because the other mayors have not contacted me, I will be voting to support them.
Thank you.
A couple of comments on the Cotton Belt, just on the language of it. I'd rather it say, because I know there's, we're at least considering a possibility of the bus rapid transit, the BRT. Is there any reason, Michael and Ken, that we need to have passenger rail? Is that trigger language under, because I understand the BRT is also eligible to be funded, and maybe we put more generic.
The only reason the passenger rail is in there, that's the mode of transportation that you have in your current plan. It specifically says passenger rail. We're not proposed to change that this fall in the current amendment to you in November. We don't know where you as local governments will go with DART's proposal on bus rapid transit. We will reconsider that. Let me remind you, the letter to the Secretary is simply for him to inventory, is there enough interest? And for him to gauge, what is the magnitude of an infrastructure bank that may seek? It doesn't necessarily prescribe to you that, you're not competing for any grant money at this particular time. You're simply assisting the Secretary to correctly stage in front of Congress what is the range of modes of which I would like to have passenger rail in there, and what is the magnitude of revenue. It is not getting you any more money on any of these particular projects until Congress would decide if an infrastructure bank would happen, and you would see the rules on how to apply for such.
Okay. Any further questions? Ms. Grayson?
Yeah, I didn't want to leave a misimpression about the Cotton Belt. My folks are not opposed to the Cotton Belt. They just haven't seen the solution yet that they feel is the right solution that doesn't negatively impact their neighborhoods. And some of these houses are as close as 25 feet to the tracks, their bedroom wall. So they're very, very concerned about this. But there is an organization that was formed years ago called the Cotton Belt Concerned Citizens Coalition. It has more than 1,000 members because there are multiple thousands of people who live so close to this tract in my district, single-family homes that are going to be impacted. And I didn't want to leave the impression that they're totally opposed to this. They just want to find the right solution. But since they're not sure that the right solution is out there yet, I just feel constrained to represent them when they have a lingering concern. They still have concern about this, and bus rapid transit may be the right solution, but that isn't what this says. This says passenger. Thank you.
Is that you?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I wanted to speak in support of the letter and request also. Years ago, we all supported going after ARAR funds for the Connected Project. We saw it as a regional project of regional significance that warranted us going past any other type of funding mechanisms to do something very important for the whole region. And I think as we pursue these type of requests, that's the same general approach here. Take these very large, very significant projects and those regions support them. That's what I speak in favor of. Jerry?
Yeah, just a real simple request. I'd like for us to use some of the same language that Secretary Foxx used in his letter to us, and that is expanding innovative financing is of course not a substitute for adequate public funding. If we could just have our kind of mantra in front of this letter or at the end of it, recognizing our position, big picture position, I'd just like to see that. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a good idea. We said earlier in this meeting, it's not about additional tools. An infrastructure bank is about more money. So we probably should reestablish that in the beginning of this particular letter and make sure that's consistent. And we would be happy to, if someone made that in the form of a motion to see if that is okay.
Do I have a motion? Second is Marky. And with that motion is including the language that Gerald is talking about. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Show one opposed. All right. Number 7. HOV lanes on US 75 and 635.
Last month, Mr. Chairman and members, I briefed you on this. I'll go through it pretty quickly, and then you have a resolution we're requesting your support of in 7.3. And I think it speaks to the point we just made. Can we use some of the resistance that we're seeing as a way to channel that concern to our state legislative delegation as they review TxDOT's request for $5 billion. So let me walk you through very quickly. All the orange lines are toll express lanes in the system. Congratulations to the North Tarrant Express opening this week on one of those facilities. It's not being picked up on the screen. There it is. Opens here all the way across to 121. I encourage you to go visit it. You can use the express lane if you wish, but it's a very nice project and the first complete toll express lane that we have. But there are 4 that should have long been replaced. US 75, 635 between 75 and 30. The reversible contraflow, moving barriers, complicated movements in the Interstate 30 corridor, and then 35E to the south. So those 4 projects remain. We have an opportunity to basically stage these facilities. I presented it to you last month. If you go to the next page, and you have this material in your handout, in the last session, 35E Southern Gateway was the priority. You and the legislature approved that. TxDOT is in the environmental study final stages. It is our hope to get 35E implemented soon. With regard to that, we believe 635 is now staged for the project to be submitted during this session. We are recommending that interim improvements be made through the introduction of single occupant vehicles onto that HOV lane. So there are 3 actions requested. Proceed with the interim improvement that would permit single occupant users onto the 635 lane. Request the legislature to be this project. We do so both in resolution and in Amanda's legislative item. And then we pass a resolution that says money in the corridor stays in the corridor, specifically meaning that the interim money that's collected, whatever isn't used for operation, that revenue stay in the 635 corridor to help pay for the permanent improvements. You've obviously done that before on other corridors. At the request of policy officials in the 75 corridor and to give support to try to move us to more of a pay-as-you-go, this action today would not have the US 75 project proceed, leave it as an HOV only. Do not proceed with an interim. Obviously proceed with the permanent solution, whatever that is, and have TxDOT get that the permanent solution implemented. We're in a very sensitive area with local governments nervous about how much right-of-way would be taken, yet we're probably in the most congested corridor in the state of Texas that does not have a solution in US 75. It is clearly the largest problem unresolved in our region. I think it may be actually statewide. And I think you're looking at potential underground recommendations on US 75, similar to the early recommendations on the 635 corridor between 35E and 75. But do not proceed with the interims at this time. Work with the legislators from that part of the region to try to gain statewide support for the pay-as-you-go system as part of that item. We've covered it almost every item today. TxDOT has the lead in the Interstate 30 corridor. Consensus hopefully can be obtained. What's the best way to proceed in Interstate 30? Commissioner Vandergriff and Mr. Hale have kicked that off this month, and we think that will be slated at this particular point as they work with the community on what's the best path forward. Now, this doesn't mean these are the only projects that can proceed. All I'm doing is trying to stage for you the blue existing HOV projects and get them in some sort of permanent situation. You have the resolution in 7.3. I won't go through it. It covers these 3 items. I'll be happy to take any questions on advancing 635 between 75 and Interstate 30, what we call phase 3 of the 635 project.
Any questions? Thank you.
Just one clarification. At our last meeting, I think at our place was a blue sheeted letter from the Federal Highway Administration that clarified that under whatever Byzantine rule they have, you can't convert the HOV lane to a free lane? I mean, I think I read that letter, and that's sort of the status of the federal law is that you can't do that. I just want to make sure I was correct in my understanding.
That was in response, I think Mr. Hale made the request of the feds to make an interpretation. You heard earlier today my view of asking the feds an interpretation. But they ruled that you cannot take the existing HOV lane and turn it into a single occupant vehicle lane in the US 75 corridor. That was the request. In the case of 635, we're simply, not so simply, we're introducing single occupant vehicle users to an underutilized HOV lane, which we very much feel we can do and have federal highway support in moving forward. In the case of the 75 question, it was eliminate the HOV and turn it into a single occupant vehicle lane. In the case of 635, introduce single occupant users to the existing HOV underutilized capacity.
Indeed, I guess, and this is, maybe I'm asking for an opinion, but it seems a little silly from an air quality analysis standpoint because the net effect is the exact same thing. It's not, you didn't make the determination, I just think it's an odd, it's a policy matter. I don't, what difference does it make? The number of cars in that lane goes up. I'm having a hard time.
Well, the policy would be you continue to market the region, you continue to maximize, hopefully, HOV users, and you're only selling the delta of the underutilized capacity. That's the proposal in 635. In the case of the 75 proposal, you are eliminating the incentive to carpool, and you're simply opening it up to single occupant users, where the HOV user would not have any incentive of a priority lane as part of that particular situation. So it's a complicated concept, but the hope is to introduce simply the sale of excess capacity while the region continues to encourage people to park.
Again, I'm projecting my own cynicism with regard to carpooling onto that scenario. That's why it doesn't make sense, but I understand.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mayor? Okay, there's a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Ron Sylvia. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8, Mr. Minnie, still Mr. Minnie, exiting the room. Legislative update, Amanda.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I have an action item for you today related to the RTC legislative program for the upcoming 84th Texas legislature. But before I get to that, I first want to briefly highlight what's going on at the U.S. Congress related to transportation. A continuing resolution was passed last month to extend all government funding, including transportation, through December 11th of 2014 at the current rate. This would take funding through the election period and into a lame duck session of Congress. So at that time, we may see either a continuing resolution into next year or an omnibus appropriations bill. So we'll wait to see in December what happens there. So I'll move on to state issues, but before I get into the draft legislative program, I just want to quickly remind everyone that Proposition 1 will be on the statewide ballot in November. You'll remember that this is a constitutional amendment that, if passed by voters, would dedicate a portion of oil and gas severance tax revenue that would normally be going into the rainy day fund and dedicate that for non-tolled transportation purposes, provided that the legislature does determine that there's a sufficient amount in the rainy day fund. The RTC previously approved a position supporting Prop 1 and separately approved a resolution supporting just a general need for adequate transportation funding. That RTC resolution was passed on to state and federal elected officials as well as U.S. Transportation Secretary Foxx. In addition, the RTC asked for this resolution to be sent to local governments, asking for cities and counties to pass similar resolutions, and this was included as electronic item 8.2, just for a reminder. To date, we have received very few resolutions back from local governments indicating support for that adequate transportation funding. If your entity has passed a resolution similar to the one in 8.2, we'd like to remind you that we would like to get a copy of that. If you haven't passed a resolution information. We are still collecting those so that we can help indicate support to the federal and state elected officials, as well as the US DOT, that there is support from our region for transportation funding. So I'll move on to the draft state legislative program, and I will be speaking mostly from the handout, reference item 8.1 that was handed out today, and it replaces the reference item 8.1 that was sent to you in your packet. The handout has strike-throughs and underlines in both black font and red font. The black font indicates changes that were made to the version you saw last month when I had an information item, and those were included in your packet. The red font shows changes that are new today that were not included in the mail out. As we've done for the past several sessions, we've split the issues up into actively pursue, which are more of the big picture items that we'll spend most of our time focusing on, and then support and monitor, which are issues that we may not be taking the lead on, but we like to have positions on, and in the event that bills begin to move, that we don't have to wait to come back to your monthly meeting to take a position. So there are 4 proposed actively pursue items, and these are listed on this slide. And then let me move and switch to the handout to walk you through those items. So the first item we show is related to public-private partnerships.
So this is the item with the red print on it?
Yes, this would be, it says, oh, my copy doesn't have it, handout reference item 8.1. So first, related to the public-private partnerships, the legislature over the past couple of sessions has been approving public-private partnerships individually at the request of regions each session, rather than just providing blanket authority for TxDOT to move on public-private partnerships. So we initially had shown 3 new projects on the list, but we've learned that the North Tarrant Express Section 3C doesn't need specific new authority to proceed, so we've removed that from this list now. So that would leave 2 new projects, IH 635 East and the Trinity Parkway, if this authority were to be requested by NTTA to be used. We know that NTTA is working with the City of Dallas on this project, and we don't know of any change to this, but as you'll hear in Ken's item next, we've been working with NTTA on a joint resolution to determine which projects to seek public-private partnership authority for the next session. And so as a contingency to leave all options on the table to deliver Trinity Parkway, this project has been put on this draft list to ask the legislature for authority for TxDOT to move forward with that project if it was requested by NTTA. In addition to the new projects that you see on the list, we would ask that any previously approved project that needed an extension of any of the deadlines related to the environmental or the bidding or the letting process would be able to continue to have that authority to proceed. The second item is to support the Air Check Texas program and seek funding that has been withheld from the program over the past 2 legislative sessions through a set of principles that would expand the program's uses. We have the counties, which is actually where this program resides when the money is returned from Austin. We had them in for a meeting last week to discuss options for the program, and of those counties that attended and provided feedback to us during the meeting and after the meeting, these principles were generally agreed to. So the principles are to appropriate all the unspent, which is about $200 million, half of which is for our region. So all the unspent and future revenue, and expand the eligibility of funds to really include transportation projects, not just the repair and replacement component, but transportation projects that would focus on air quality benefits like intersection improvements or bottleneck improvements or so forth, but still maintaining a minimum threshold of funds to be spent on the repair and replacement component while giving the regions flexibility to meet that threshold. So moving on to the next page, the third item is unchanged from what you saw last month, and that is really just to identify additional transportation revenue. I think we've talked about that a few times today. And then finally on the actively pursue list is related to high-speed rail. And as indicated last month to you, we have a 1-word change that is different from what was in the September packet, but we did indicate that at the meeting. So the position reads to provide TxDOT with all the legal ability to implement high-speed rail as they have roadways, such as oversight, procurement, and development. We changed the word from funding to development, really because at this time the High Speed Rail Commission is focused more on federal funds, and the word development more broadly looks at the ability of TxDOT to utilize those funds once they're allocated to the project and work on a range of development activities. So we continue to note that this is pending the High Speed Rail Commission and TxDOT action, so if we need to bring any further refinements to this position as they take any actions, we would do so. So that takes care of the items to actively pursue, which again are the really big items. So we have the support and monitor list for the rest. So in your handout, reference item 8.1, we've changed some bullet points to check marks, and that indicates where we're just carrying forward existing positions that the RTC had taken during the last legislative session. So the check marks indicate they're the same position. Bullet points indicate either a new position or modified in some way. So what I'd like to do, just in the interest of time, is go through the ones we've changed, and then if there's any questions on the other items, I'm welcome to take those. So the majority of changes are under our air quality section. We were just going through the wording to make sure that we have the best wording, and that's led to some updated text. So if we look at the second bullet down, I'm on page 2 of the handout with the red. The second bullet is now stricken. So before asking for legislative action on this item, we really want to look at pursuing a pilot program to ensure that the air quality benefits that we think that we would get from this item would be achieved before asking for full implementation. On the third bullet, we've been reviewing recent legislative discussions regarding TURP. And like our AirCheck Texas program, it has a large unspent balance. This is about $900 million, so much larger than even the AirCheck Texas balance. But similar to our draft position that I just talked about on AirCheck, we'd like to consider expanding this program as well to transportation projects that would be related to goods movement, but also have an air quality benefit. That's where the money comes from, is the goods movement and construction sector. So utilizing, continuing to do projects in those areas with an air quality benefit would make sense. All right, so moving down 2 bullets to where you'll see one position that's completely struck out and 2 underlined positions just below it. The 2 underlined positions are really very similar to positions that were approved by the RTC last session. We had attempted to combine those into one position, which is the one that's shown in strikeout. As we were going over the positions this week, we really felt that what was shown in the strike-through could look too much like asking for a new tax to be created, which was not the intention. So as you see in the underlying positions, it's really exploring a shift to funding sources to keep up with the lost purchasing power of the existing gas tax based on increased fuel efficiency of vehicles, as well as exploring options for electric vehicles to participate in funding the transportation system. And so if you move to page 4 of the handout, the last bullet point before you get to the legislation to monitor section, we've added county roads to this item based on last month's discussion. And then the final change from last month is the very last bullet under the legislation to monitor, which is to review the continued need for eminent domain authority of private toll road corporations. As Michael mentioned earlier during our public meeting on the Blacklands Corridor feasibility study, many of the commenters brought up the issue of a private company with eminent domain authority. In fact, State Senator-elect Bob Hall spoke at the meeting on this topic. So we thought it was appropriate for the RTC to weigh in that the continued need for this authority be reviewed by the legislature. So those are all of the changes that we have from what we saw in September when this was an information item. We also have reference item 8.4, which is what we would ask for your action on today. It's a resolution, and it would approve what's in the handout version of reference item 8.1 as an attachment to the resolution, and direct that the RTC's legislative program be communicated to state legislators. It would also authorize the transportation director to communicate these positions on behalf of the RTC. This communication is not lobbying. It's generally through requests for testimony or direct questions from legislators or their staffs on pending legislation. Last month I talked about the ways we'll keep RTC members informed about bills moving through the process and opportunities to participate in committee hearings. It's just important to note again that our staff members, we don't lobby. We provide education on transportation matters and answer questions. We rely on the RTC members to actively be contacting members of the legislature regarding the transportation issues in this legislative program. And we're, of course, happy to provide you with any resources that you would need to assist in that communication. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Just a little clarification on the eminent domain issue, and that is when we say we're going to review, monitoring legislation about reviewing, and I presume that means just watch and report back, but the RTC is not taking a position.
Right. I think the way we wrote
tell me what it means.
Well, I think the way we wrote this position would be to not necessarily say that we think that the private sector should continue to have this or that they should not continue to have this, but that the legislature is the one that should review whether this authority should continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amanda, just one question. I'm down on air quality, shift to VMT. The way it's stated, shift to a VMT tax rather than a fuel tax. What kind of headwinds do we face when we start looking at the diversions that are already out of our state sales tax, 20 cents? Have we even thought about that?
Well, I would say that we're not necessarily, since this is not on the actively pursue items, I would not say that the RTC should be taking the lead on a switch to a VMT tax, but it's definitely something that's out there as an option. What we're seeing is that as vehicles get more fuel efficient, we're getting less transportation revenue through that gas tax. So, there are plans out there, I think, to shift to a VMT tax, and I don't think we would want it to be in addition to a gas tax. I think you would want it to be a replacement, so you would, continue to see the additional revenue from that versus the declining revenue of the gas tax.
Charles, and I'll just say this, as I go out throughout my district and talk about transportation planning, one of the things that I get more pushback on than anything is VMT, and that's Big Brother. The way they're proposing, if you have a computer chip in your car, computer chip on the pump, tells where you've driven, if you're going to charge more, if you've driven in congested areas. The dial report, I don't remember if it was the TTC or TxDOT that commissioned that report, and they came back with that recommendation on VMT, and other states have tried that too. I'm not real sure we ought to weigh in on that until we see specifics on that, because to me that's a very slippery slope. So,
Yeah, thank you, Sir Chair. Now that y'all will caught up with me. On this number 3, I thought we had said that our primary priority was to seek additional revenue. So are these listed in priority order? If so, I think that needs to be number 1.
When we did our legislative program last session, it was determined that this funding should move down in the priority. So I think we just left things in sort of the priority order that they had been in last session, but we would certainly be open to moving 1 through 4 around in any order that the council saw fit.
Yes, I definitely support that suggestion. We did have the opportunity in my city to put this on a work session agenda earlier this week, and not the red line version that you have submitted, and I sincerely, Ms. Wilson, appreciate. I can't imagine the hours that you put into bringing this before us. The will of my council, while we support the vast majority of the legislative agenda that you presented here, we don't support it in full. And so, for example, the VMT tax issue is one. Also, the new use fee is another. Just without understanding fully the implications of some of those new instruments, we're uneasy. And those aren't the only. I'm not going to go through the whole agenda, but it's disappointing to me to have to vote no, because again, it seems like that's the only way forward here is a full yes or no vote. I just want to acknowledge to the group that I will be voting no, but I support. And our council supports the vast majority of the positions, most specifically the priorities that you just mentioned. The first priority, which is to identify transportation revenue. But there's a lot of good advocacy in here, and so I'll be called upon to help further some of those positions. I'll be standing in the 12-man position ready to do so, but not the entire thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Lydia, is that yours or Shepard?
Thank you. On the last bullet on planning, the gas drilling, could you kind of explain that to me? Because who are they going to notify? I mean, they already notified the Railroad Commission. Who are you notifying if they're drilling a well? And I've seen county roads that are gravel roads, and they've got wells all up and down. So I need to know why we need that, and we've already got it as far as I know.
I think some of that communication is not getting to, say, the Department of Transportation that, is looking at expanding or building roadways. And so, they may make decisions, or cities or counties may make decisions not knowing that a gas well is going to be sited very near there, and then an option for a transportation improvement may go away because of where a gas well is sited. So I think this is just to get ahead of, for planning purposes, when we're looking at building transportation infrastructure and making sure that we know all of the factors. And so it would just be an additional notification to some of these transportation entities.
But you said by notifying the transportation commission, how would that make the well go away when it's already approved by the Railroad Commission?
I don't think it would make the well go away. It would make the transportation planning process. People would know about that further in advance, so that they can be considering that when looking at the routes for roadways or passenger rail facilities.
Okay, I see where you're coming from, but these are posted. The wells are posted. People know that the well is going. That's what I'm not understanding. How does doing this make any difference? By notifying people already are going to know that well is going there by what is done through the railroad commission.
Maybe give you an answer. Well, let me try. For years, when private sector railroads gave up right-of-way, there was a notification process that supposedly happened to the states and back to communities. But we have lost thousands of miles of rail right-of-way because of poor notification procedures, where if local governments and counties, TxDOT and others were notified earlier that a right-of-way was going to be abandoned, there would have been an opportunity to reserve it for bicycle paths or something. And as a result, those right-of-ways have reverted back to adjacent landowners, complicated title searches, and the like. In this particular case, we are hearing this has nothing to do with if a well should be built or not. It is simply, should the legislature, remember, this is not under actively pursued, but if someone were to come along and pass a bill or propose a bill that said, we think all government should be informed of where the location of a particular well is so they can plan better the results of that. That's what this is trying to do. If you don't have it, that means when someone introduces a legislation, we would not be able to act in your behalf, that you support it or not. We'd have to wait and bring it to you as a standalone item for you to consider.
But what I'm saying, should that not be the job of the Railroad Commission to make sure that happens?
Yeah, but I think, to be honest with you, I don't think that's adequately being communicated by the Railroad Commission today.
And I understand what you're saying about I stuck 3 or 4 wells right in the line where you need to put a railroad train. That'd be pretty bad.
That's right. So this is a question for the legislature to review. Are they happy with what the notification is?
Yeah.
Then great. If they're not happy with it, then what we're saying, TxDOT should be notified about interstate highways and state highways. If there's things along county roads, county should be informed. If it's around passenger rail lines, DART and others should be able to be informed, so on and so forth.
And that would be done possibly by the board and sent to maybe the transportation department
or just a notification of a website or an RSS feed.
Or just, put it in the paper. We're really serious.
Yeah, hopefully it's electronic communication. But I'll be up to the race.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy, you said.
I just want to quickly clarify from a county perspective, we can't control, and it's not about controlling wells or anything of that sort. The Railroad Commission is behind in huge numbers. If you call them today, you'll get a different number than you will next week about what's current. So from a county perspective, really, maybe the cities may not need it as much because y'all have ordinance making power, but it's a great benefit to the counties if we knew, and not just where to put roads from an emergency management standpoint. It would be great to know. So I think it'd really be beneficial across the state. So,
Sandy.
Thank you. Amanda, I had a number of questions on page 3. And I know this is under support, but I just had put the top bullet point about video archiving for a 24-hour period, and then the exemption of that archived video from the Public Information Act. What's the rationale for exempting it?
This has been a position for several years. I think the exemption, I would say, is related to, you don't want to get involved in providing information for lawsuits, like if you happen to record an accident or something like that. But I think this would be if there was some sort of traffic incident that happened, you could go back and look at that and review to see, well, what were the procedures that were used? Did we clear that accident or that incident in an effective way? So you can actually learn from that. Other than, it's right now, I think they're all just deleted immediately after the video is taken. These are the the cameras that are on the side of the road.
So they're deleted immediately, and this saves some of them for a 24-hour period, in
Right.
which case then it's gone.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, you would be able to go back and review and say, okay, well, what did we do here in this incident response? Was that appropriate? What could we learn from that? So that you could use that as a
The
tool
other
for the
example would be
future.
if bad people did something with regard to an interchange, you would be able to look to see how you could catch the bad guys with regard to it. You would know within a 24-hour period if something happened, and then it just naturally goes away. So government isn't like in the BMT tax situation, recording images for some other purpose. It's simply for review of incidents or some security breach or.
But not for purposes of private attorney suing.
That's right. We already have some relief with regard to that, but we don't want to be in the business of being drugged into court to deal with some particular situation.
Thank you. My next questions are about the planning. The first bullet point, support additional legislative tools for COG, et cetera. What are those additional legislative tools?
Right.
Or is it that you don't know them yet, and so you just, whatever they are, we support them?
Well, I think this was developed last session related to the Cotton Belt, where we didn't know perhaps what the exact tool that was going to be at the beginning. We take our position here in October, and then, bills are introduced through March of next year. So, we don't know what the exact tool would be. I think, that getting projects moving through the plan and what plan projects we have, getting those implemented and using tools to do that is something that the RTC has supported in previous legislative sessions, so we carried that through.
So it's sort of a blanket statement, and then that tool might come back to us for a yes or no.
Yes, I think that would be appropriate.
On the second bullet point about supporting legislation that would limit the imposition of damages against a Class 1 railroad that allows their property to be used for public passenger rail service, I seem to recall an RTC meeting about that maybe a year ago, where we were asked about this, and the group did not come to a resolution on that. We never took a vote, was my recollection of that, and yet here it is.
I believe there was a vote taken, and we did move forward with that position. We're not, I think, going to be, again, this is not on the actively pursue list, but this is really needed when we're implementing passenger rail on those Class 1 railroads. DART owns their own rail, so they're fortunate that they don't have to deal with this too much in their existing system. But for the T and DCTA to expand further, they're going to be looking at Class 1 railroads. And so it's really to get that, what they're needing is the Class 1 railroads are requiring this in order to go on their right-of-way.
I understand that, and I remember this discussion very well, but my concern was that we were basically saying that we were willing to have our folks who live next to these railroad tracks not be able to claim damages to the extent they might. So we're kind of limiting the ability of our folks to collect damages, and so that would be concerned.
I think Ms. Grayson is 100% correct. The issue is the passenger rail entities within the region need some relief if they're going to expand motor rail to other corridors with regard to the magnitude of the insurance coming to cover. The other issue you correctly stated was, well, many of our citizens that get injured, then it isn't the magnitude of the amount that the Class 1 railroads have. And that's the issue. And you're absolutely correct in your memory with regard to it was not a consensus.
There wasn't a consensus on that. We talked and talked and we didn't arrive at a conclusion. But that greatly concerns me. The second bullet point from the bottom, could you remind me what Rider 42 is?
This is the rider that requires TxDOT to working with TTI to list the top 100 most congested roadway segments. The issue here is that there's a different methodology that's used from year to year, so that's why you see differences in the number 1, number 2, number 3 segments, because they use different segment lengths, and so we would just want MPOs to have some involvement in determining how those segments are determined each year.
Is Rider 42 mean a rider to a bill?
It's a rider in the appropriations bill.
Oh, okay.
And the number may change, but it's typically known as Rider 42 because that's the original number that it had in the appropriations bill.
Kind of vague. Okay. The last bullet point. No, not the last bullet point. This is the first bullet point about red light cameras on the next page. When you say maintain current revenue sharing with the state, does that mean that we don't want the state to take any more of the city's money? Is that what we're trying to maintain?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll go for that. Okay. But that said, I too am not going to be able to support this. There's a lot of good work in here, Amanda, and I really do appreciate all the hard work that's gone into it, but there's some items that really concern me, and of course always the Trinity Parkway item, but there's others in here that concern me too. But I did want to say, I think most of it is excellent, so thank you.
And one of the things we might want to do, if it's agreement with everybody, is maybe delay action on this and let everybody submit whatever concerns they have specifically to Amanda, and then let's work at it and bring it back next. We're already getting to after 4, and I know people are leaving, and I want to be sure we hear everybody, but that's one thing that we might want to do, and we have 2 other items that we need to hit. I think Bill O'Brien, you were next.
I was just going to say that TxDOT will abstain from voting on the legislative agenda.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Matthew.
Well, I guess my comment is that I'm trying to understand the interaction between this item and the next item. So, if I understand right, the next item is a resolution about a legislative program to include certain CDAs, and then that's also the first bullet point here. Is it just redundant, or?
Yeah, I think one of the things what Ken will be presenting to you is the partnership program between the RTC and NTTA is an information item. This was an action item. So because one's information, one is action, and you still have specific questions, I think if you delay this legislative item, give you all a chance to look at the details. What I'm hearing you may want to do is keep to this actively pursue, and then maybe you want to shorten the items you have over time with regard to what you want to give blanket support to. You know, hey, maybe the BMT tax should be moved away from legislation to support, and the BMT tax should be moved to the monitor and say, any legislation on BMT, bring it to us for consideration. So, because Ken is information, the thought is, if you all give your comments to Amanda that she asked for last time that you were all too busy to send to her, but now that we're getting closer to action, you're now thinking about it. Now if you send them to her, she can maybe tighten this up, and then Ken's action next month will be tied directly to the same position, you know, the benefit of hearing Ken before you ask to vote on this.
Okay. And I guess I had a question on the CDA projects. I think you mentioned it, you talked to NTTA specifically about the Trinity and I think others, but I don't want to
put him on the spot. He doesn't have a nameplate, but he's sitting here. So I was going to see if maybe Commissioner Vandergriff would talk about whether TxDOT want this Trinity CDA or any of these other CDAs. Do they have a position as we're sort of getting all of our heads together on this? Is that I hate to do that to you.
Could I say one thing before you ask him to speak, so we have the right context? The NTTA idea is our idea. NTTA is 100% responsible to build the Trinity. As projects get closer to environmental clearance, we start working on how we're going to fund it. We are not saying TxDOT is necessarily interested in this particular position. And I know it puts NTTA in a difficult position because they're responsible to deliver the Trinity. But who knows what NTTA is or isn't going to do? The question is, do we want a contingency or the flexibility if in case NTTA were to say, for whatever reason, we wish to not move forward with the project? The question would be, would this body be interested in saying, okay, TxDOT, would you be interested if the legislature gave you the authority to use your CDA authority, and then hopefully you have to put any money into it to see if the private sector would be willing to build the project. So this isn't coming from NTTA, it isn't coming from TxDOT, it's coming from us solely as a contingency as part of that position. So I'm trying to not put pressure on the commissioner. He can speak for himself, but it isn't coming from them, and it's not coming from NTTA. Okay.
No good deed goes unpunished. To come to meeting and have to talk about the Trinity. No offense to that project. The commission, I know for certainty, as well as TxDOT, is not working actively on this project beyond supporting the region in developing it, and seeing how it will be developed. As far as NTTA is concerned, they do have the right. They have the promise in this project. My certain understanding is they do also have CDA authority on their own. So if a CDA was to be pursued, I think that perhaps TxDOT at this point is a redundant factor in that CDA authority can be taken through NTTA. And the second I would have to say is, just in all honesty, there is so much on the department's plate right now, and there is just quite candidly, an anti-toll sentiment out there that is permeating throughout Texas, but specifically coming out of the legislature and the Metroplex here. I'm just not sure we need another brick on our wagon, even though it's, as Mr. Morris is rightly pointed out, this is not CDA is not, or excuse me, TxDOT and the Transportation Commission are not claiming this road, but merely putting it on your legislative agenda puts us in the box. So I would say we would prefer to not be there.
I like the suggestion of Mr. Morris. I think his description is made accurately. Finally, when it comes up for action, I kind of focus a lot of energy in each one of these. And I'm to the point now that I support most of them, but there are a few ones that give me some heartburn and some cause to question whether I want to be on the record for supporting them. I do like the idea of coming back, submitting yays, nays, so that you can at least find out what my stance is on all of them and go from there. So I do like the concept of postponing for actions.
So I got the motion table, and I'll second. There's a motion table second in Judge and Danny, you your comments.
I'm just very, very quickly, and if you want to approve the motion, that's great too. It's another alternative. But I do want to remind you that there's a few items on here that I personally probably wouldn't be my stance. But this isn't about me personally. There's a couple items on here that perhaps my city, we haven't voted on this, but there may be some folks in my city that may not. And I know there's some items on here that some of my constituents don't like. But in general, this advances our role as a regional transportation council. And while there may be some tweaks, any document I think that's from legislative, especially one that has some things where we support it and where we're trying to give staff a little bit of leeway, it's going to have some things that not every single person here is going to agree on. And I would just say, we can say it publicly, just because you happen to vote for this does not mean that you absolutely ideologically support every single thing that's in here. Therefore, we said it right here on the record. If some constituent comes back to you and says, my goodness, you supported this thing, I want to hold you accountable. I think that you can say reasonably you are supporting generally the advancement of transportation in Texas, which is what we're supposed to do. Now, if we want to go ahead and go through the iterations of looking at each individual item and trying to report where that is, as self-preservation in some future election, I think that's fine. But I just think we need to understand this. We are just generally saying this. We agree with most of this stuff. We all have our opportunity to go individually meet with our legislators, to take stuff from our legislative committees, from our cities, and go do that. Join whatever pack you want to or anything else. But I don't think we should get too hung up on single line items or individual words or something that's in this package. Generally, I think this is where we ought to go, even though I've got a couple of tweaks that was my personal document that I would make. And that's mine. Amanda, thank you for your work.
Thank you, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amanda put up a general slide at the very beginning with 4 general categories on actively pursued. Can you put those back up, please? Those do not have the specifics. I wonder if we could adopt that general stance and then come back and talk about specifics under the general stance. And I'll make a motion to that effect.
We already have a motion on the floor.
Well, this is acceptable.
Let's do first.
Sorry.
I think
Robert
you can't debate it, move the table. I mean, you can't, once you move the table made, you have to take a vote. Period. Period. We shouldn't even be discussing. We
Okay.
should have made a motion and seconded and vote.
I was trying to.
That's the rules. You were trying to be polite, but
And let them
sometimes that gets us in trouble.
I understand. We'll entertain the motion to table.
That's the rules.
I understand.
By Miss Ruthie Jackson, and she taught me well.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion to table say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, it has been tabled. It carries. Okay, so submit, based on the motion, we're going to submit. Anybody who wants to submit anything to Amanda, we'll do that.
April will send to you whatever the last version Amanda has to each member with instruction to send, get it back to Amanda at a certain time so she can see how it goes forward.
All right, item number 9, which is an information. Ken, you talk to us about CDA authority.
Very good. Good afternoon,
Somebody
everyone.
let Mark in know that we're
So, this is an information item on CDA authority and our efforts with NTTAs, has already been alluded to. And Mayor Marchand, if I could just help provide some clarity on why we have a separate legislative program, and then we bring a separate item on a joint position with NTTA and CDA authority. So as you know, different organizations have different legislative programs, and they may not be identical. So our history of the last 2 legislative sessions has been to work with NTTA and our partners with TxDOT to develop a common list of CDA projects to advance to the legislature, so that in the spring, if there's a question asked, we have a common list that we all support, so that NTTA doesn't have a list, and RTC has a list, and the TxDOT has a list. So we develop a common position that may or may not be the same as everyone's legislative program. So that's why we separate that out and bring that forward as a separate sub-element of the legislative program. Just one additional note. If you recall, at one time, the legislative position was TxDOT had blanket CDA authority, but they moved to a position of very limited, project specific, and so that's what we're trying to get to. We've done this in the 2 past legislative sessions, and we'll reiterate the projects that we sought authority for previously. The projects on the list that we're working with NTTA on, we've already mentioned them: 635 East from 75 to 30, Trinity Parkway. NTTA has the first option. They have CDA authority. This would only be a contingency. staff's recommendation would be contingency in the event that NTTA waive primacy, elected not to use their CDA authority, just a delivery tool that would be available to TxDOT if that were desirable amongst the parties. And then we've reviewed all the existing projects that have CDA authority to determine whether or not we need extensions. So we just put in a general position of support in case there needs to be a tweak or two for existing projects that are already listed in the statute. So we're working with NTTA. Reference item 9 is a draft resolution. We provided that to NTTA staff. They're still navigating that through their committee process. We're out in front of them just a little bit, so we'll have an opportunity to get their full feedback, and once they've taken that through their committee process, and then we would propose to bring this back to you for action in November, well in advance of the legislative session. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Just want to provide you with that brief update.
Okay, any questions? It's informational only. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item number 10. Michael, I did want to ask one question to Bill. Are you in a position now to hire a Dallas district engineer? I mean, what is your, sort of give us an understanding of where you're at on that?
I expect to discuss regarding the administration and proceed with the hiring of the district engineer for the Dallas district.
Okay. So, Michael, do you have anything to add? Or?
Well, the question is, I guess if anyone has any direction you wish to give me, this is an action item on your agenda next month. There was a workshop for an hour or so. I'm not sure you reached any consensus. One option was to get the Hunt County area inside the Dallas district and proceed with 2 districts and leave the rest of the districts alone.
And let me ask you a question. Has that been vetted with Hunt County? Have y'all had an opportunity to talk to Hunt County?
We have not.
Okay.
I have. I think the judge would be interested in seeing if we could get in the Dallas district, but that's a conversation Bill should have with the judge. So.
I guess I believe that's an RTC decision. But we had a discussion with them if they wish to join the RTC in the Dallas district. We'll have that discussion with them, but I think that's a good discussion. It's to match everything with the other.
All right. Any direction from anyone?
Just so we would, the RTC is who decides whether Hunt County stays in or out.
No, Hunt County is in the MPO boundary.
I know that.
Okay.
As far as, are they going to stay in the Dallas TxDOT district or go to Paris? Are they going to stay in Paris or come to Dallas? Who do we decide that?
I would suggest that's a recommendation from the RTC, and that Hunt join the Dallas district if that's what they wish. And then we'll consider the commission or our administration will consider that at that point.
Okay, because I talked to Judge Moore. I think he wants to stay in Paris. I think the county wants to stay in Paris. But we can figure it out.
We will call him. That would be news to me if that was what he said. So.
Okay.
David?
Well, that was my comment that Judge Horn should speak to that issue.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to make sure that we hear what he has to say.
Okay. So, Michael,
So let me think about what was said. I certainly was here for the work session. I'll see if there's any consensus to bring forward. If there is, we will put an action item on your agenda. But so far, we've heard all the way to combine the 2 districts to don't do anything. And there's about 5 options in between. And there is no consensus. So whatever direction people want to brainstorm with me and see if there's an ability, it wouldn't be in the form of a resolution. It would be in the form of a letter going to the commission, copying Bill. Here is our input on this particular subject. I remain concerned with the magnitude of the legislative stuff before us. You want to be very careful on how much you do in this particular area, because the legislature historically has been very sensitive to TxDOT districts and changes to districts and so on and so forth.
Is there anyone with just a real strong passion to move for a change other than the status quo that we have right now?
Well, the only thing is consider the Hunt County deal. Conn County really wants to be a part of the Dallas district, and they're already part of NPO. Take that to a logical conclusion, but I didn't feel any passion to make other substantial changes.
So, does that give you direction, Mike?
Yes, and I'll meet with Bill and Brian and see what they heard in the workshop. We very much appreciate, we've had you for a long time today. We very much appreciate all your time.
You bet. And are they, everybody here is invited to the reception? Out in the lobby. I think you already missed the ice cream out in the room. So you're invited to the reception. Thank y'all very much. We're adjourned.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to let the good man know that we did check Robert's rules of order. He is a bit mistaken, but it's too late to pursue it this time. He's a whole lot mistaken. In other words, he's wrong.
All right, thank you.